All right, everybody, welcome in to the show. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to do all that YouTube stuff. Subscribe to the channel, like the video. If you're listening on the Pump Fake podcast feed, be sure to leave a review. And yeah, the big news of the day, well, I guess, Steelers related, if we're going to try to make it Steelers related here. Cooper Kupp last night on Twitter revealed that the Rams were going to be seeking trade partners for him in the immediate future, and that the Rams were going to work with him to send him to a place where he can still contend for a championship. And so this also comes off the back of Myles Garrett requesting a trade. So in the matter of 24 hours, we had two of, the best players in the NFL over the last, 8 years or so. One revealing he wants out, the other revealing he doesn't necessarily want to leave, but his team is going to work to find him a new team. And with the Steelers, obviously they didn't do much to fill the void that was left behind after they traded Deontay Johnson last year. And they can't afford to make that same mistake again. And if you can add a Cooper Kupp, and granted, he's 32 years old, he's aged gracefully into being the number 2 option in the Rams offense opposite of Puka Nacua, who has obviously emerged as one of the top receivers in football over the last 2 years. But even then, at his age, he's still productive. He's still one of the better route runners in the NFL. Really good underneath option, a really good yards after catch option, which is something that the Steelers haven't really had opposite of George Pickens. And assuming that they keep Pickens, which, isn't a foregone conclusion that they will, but assuming that they do, they're going to need other receivers, regardless if he's there or not. And if you can go and get yourself a Cooper Kupp, they can do it for cheap, considering the fact, like we pointed out, it's, a 32-year-old receiver on the back end of his career. And it shouldn't take more than a day 3 pick or maybe a pair of day 3 picks, because he is still a good receiver to get this thing done. And the Steelers have a trio of 7th round picks that they could send. Obviously, probably not going to send all 3, but if they sent a pair of them to the Rams, or if they sent a 7 and perhaps a 4th in exchange for Cooper Kupp, that's a fair deal on both ends. Now, last year, the talk about the receiver market was that, these guys are getting traded for next to nothing. Jerry Jeudy went for a day 3 pick, and then he had a career year in Cleveland. We saw Deontay Johnson get traded for a day 3 pick and Dante Jackson. So, teams that were looking for a receiver, if there were ones available, you could trade for one for relatively cheap. Even in season, it kind of swayed a little bit because the Bills got Amari Cooper for a 4th round pick. The Steelers traded a day 3 pick for Mike Williams. So it was a lot of varying things, but it felt like, all right, day 3 picks seem to be what you're going to send if you want a receiver. But, by the way, Amari Cooper, a 5-time Pro Bowler, Mike Williams had some success in his career, just wasn't working out with the Jets. Ultimately didn't work out in Pittsburgh either. But the point being is that there is kind of a certain bar set for what they'd have to give up to get Cooper Kupp, and it's not a high one. It's not going to cost them premium draft capital to get Kupp. And if you can move a day 3 pick to get a legitimate number 2 receiver, something you don't have right now, then go ahead and do it. And again, assuming that they keep George Pickens, you trade for Cooper Kupp and you sign a guy like Darius Slayton, that's a pretty solid trio of receivers, not to mention the fact that Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson are still both there. That's miles better than what we saw this past season when they were, gluing together, all right, Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller, I love Ben Skoranek, but like it's Ben Skoranek shouldn't be getting premium targets in the offense, right? He's a great special teams guy, occasional gadget guy who can get, a target here and there. He shouldn't be, your number 2, number 3 receiver, which at times he was, especially at the tail end of last year. So if they can improve this receiver room by making those 2 moves, they should absolutely do it. And there's going to be teams that they're going to be fighting with if they do pursue Cooper Kupp. They were in on him when it was rumored that the Rams would potentially move him at the deadline. Obviously, the Rams didn't end up doing that. They won a string of games and ended up winning the NFC West. But had they not defeated, I want to say it was a Thursday night game against the Vikings. Had they not won that game, they probably would have traded Cooper Kupp. But they win that game. They stay, in a good spot in the NFC West race. They end up winning the division. So, things turned out the way they did and they held on to him. But it looked like they were pretty close to sending him somewhere. Now, like I said, he took to Twitter to say that he will be on a new team this coming season. And the Steelers are going to have some competitors if they do want to get him. Houston is a team that comes to mind right away. They just hired the Rams pass game coordinator Nick Caley to be their offensive coordinator. And in terms of Kupp coming out and basically saying, like, yeah, I want to win another ring. Houston's a team that's won a playoff game in back-to-back years. There's a couple pieces away from taking that leap from, solid playoff team to real contender. Many people thought they were going to take that leap this year after acquiring Stephon Diggs. They signed Danielle Hunter to put alongside Will Anderson. They made a lot of the right moves. It's just that the offensive line took a massive step back, which no one really saw coming, and injuries. Stephon Diggs was gone by mid-year, and then for the second straight year, Tank Dell has a massive knee injury to end the season and isn't available for the playoffs. So they were basically right back where they were in 2023 at the tail end of this season, going into the playoffs with low firepower outside of Nico Collins. And oddly enough, the wild card round went extremely similar for Houston too, where the defense had multiple takeaways, pick sixes, and were just dominant, and the offense didn't have to do a whole lot. And then they face a team in Kansas City that they were just outmatched for and came up short. But if you can add a Cooper Kupp to that offense to complement Nico Collins, and again, it would still allow him to be the number 2 option. And when Tank Dell gets back, he can be, sometimes the number 3 option. But if you can have a trio eventually, because, we don't know when Tank Dell's going to be back, I would highly doubt it's, at the start of the season, considering when the injury occurred. But especially like down the stretch, if Tank Dell comes back and is productive, and you have Collins, Kupp, and Dell as a trio, I mean, that's difficult for a team to stop because you got to account for all 3 of those guys. So Houston is a team that I would pay attention to. I think Buffalo is another one of those teams where, they swung for Amari Cooper, and the numbers weren't gaudy by any means. But for Buffalo, it was a situation where just having him on the field helped open up stuff for guys like Khalil Shakir and Matt Collins, because even if Cooper wasn't putting up massive numbers, you still had to respect the fact that he can still go get those deep balls, and he drew attention, which opened up stuff underneath. So they gave up, a day 3 pick for what was practically a really good decoy who would occasionally make a pretty big catch. And now, there's a large difference between Amari Cooper and Cooper Kupp because, as I pointed out already, Kupp is still productive. So if they can give up they have a horde of day 3 picks. They can send 2 of them and they won't miss any of them. So if you want to trade, a 5 and a 6, if you're Buffalo, to the Rams to get Cooper Kupp, I think that makes all the sense in the world. You can put him both on the boundary and in the slot. If you go 4 wide, then you got Khalil Shakir and Cooper Kupp both in the slot. That's a pain in the ass that teams would have to deal with. And that would be really hard. Like, it's 3rd and 6. That is something that defenses don't want to see, where you got 2 legit dudes that are really good slot receivers. Even for a team, like the Chiefs, who could put Trent McDuffie on one of them in the slot, who's going to take Cooper Kupp, who's going to take Khalil Shakir, whoever's, McDuffie's not on. You got to keep building to beat the Chiefs. That's what Buffalo builds themselves for, is beat Kansas City. And they keep getting really close and coming up short. But if you can add a receiver like Cooper Kupp who would be utilized in that offense, then that's a move that makes all the sense in the world for the Bills. And I think that those are the 2 biggest ones to watch out for. I wrote a few days ago in terms of trades to maybe keep an eye on. Just a straight up almost with, some draft swapping of sorts. But Denver, if they would send Courtland Sutton for Cooper Kupp and then have some sort of pick swap in there, I think that's possible. And I talked about it on the pump fake. If you're the Rams, you get a downfield, field stretching receiver like Courtland Sutton, and you send Cooper Kupp to an offense that would really fit what he does well, which is catch, those short underneath passes and get some solid yards after the catch, which Denver does a lot of and Sean Payton's offense does a lot of. I think it would benefit both teams. And in that situation, the Broncos would have something much more valuable than just a day 3 pick to send in return. They'd have Courtland Sutton to send back. And some people might be like, well, why would they trade Courtland Sutton if you can keep Courtland Sutton and have Cooper Kupp on the same receiving core, which is certainly possible, where they would just keep Sutton throughout this year. But he is also in the last year of his deal. Last year, it was made known that he wanted more money. He wanted a new deal. They did not give it to him. He didn't hold out. He went along business as usual. But now we're entering this offseason where, again, nothing got done. He's entering the final year of his deal, and maybe he wants to go somewhere else. It's certainly possible that he gets moved. And if you're the Rams, then maybe that's something that you would explore, especially if you can get Courtland Sutton in the deal. But I think that those would probably be the biggest threats to Pittsburgh. And again, that comes with a caveat of, God forbid, the Chiefs end up pulling it off, because it's the same thing that I talked about with the Myles Garrett stuff yesterday, where it's just like, why? They could potentially be coming off 3 straight Super Bowl wins, and then they add Cooper Kupp. Like, that's the worst case scenario. So hopefully all the doomsday stuff of Kansas City or like Philadelphia, hopefully that doesn't take place. I think Washington could be another fun fit for him, especially, we're seeing a veteran like Zach Ertz thrive in Washington this past season. But they need another receiver. Or Terry McLaurin's great, but, as great as Olamide Zaccheaus, a few weeks that he had, Jamison Crowder, those aren't guys that are keeping defensive coordinators up at night. So if you can put Cooper Kupp in the slot and also be able to move him out wide and maybe, put Luke McCaffrey in there in some situations, if you bring in another receiver to put in the slot via free agency or the draft, there's a lot of different things that you could do with Cooper Kupp. I think that would make a lot of sense, especially in the Cliff Kingsbury offense, where they do a lot of the short passing game. They do a lot of the screen stuff. So I think that Kupp would fit in well in Washington, considering how good he is after the catch and how he is in the short and intermediate game. So I think that Washington would be a fun fit. Maybe Jacksonville. There's connective tissue there with Liam Cohen, who spent time in Los Angeles. And in terms of the Jaguars, I think a lot of their issues last year were really stemming from Doug Peterson just being basically checked out, and organizational shortcomings that stem from team building by Trent Baalke. But now it's a new regime. Trevor Lawrence is a good quarterback. You got Brian Thomas there as well to, you can take the attention off one another. Now, adding Cooper Kupp isn't going to automatically make the Jaguars a Super Bowl team, it'll make the offense more fun. It'll make the offense more dangerous. So that's something that I could see coming to fruition just because of the connective tissue with Liam Cohen, having a good quarterback in place. Like, look, I know a lot of people are going to look at the record of the Jaguars last year and say, oh, no, they're still a dumpster fire. Like, no, the 49ers had a bad year as well. And that's comparing apples to oranges because the 49ers have had success. But the Jaguars had recent success too. Like, Trevor Lawrence helped them win a playoff game. He had a really good year in 2022. Now, like, if not for a Jamal Agnew fumble, if they score on that drive, they potentially beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead. I don't think we should be writing Trevor Lawrence off. Like, we've seen enough to be like, yeah, he's good. I'm not standing up here and saying that he's, a top 10 quarterback, but I think like right around 11, 12, 13, he's right in that category. And in today's NFL, 15 years ago, he would be a top 10 quarterback. But there's such an abundance of good quarterbacks now where, just because you might not be in that top 5, top 8, top 10 group, that doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden bad. So I think that Lawrence is going to have a lot to prove. I think talent-wise, there's still an uncapped ceiling there. And putting Cooper Kupp there could be fun. And it could help take them back to where they were in previous seasons where they were winning games in the playoffs, winning playoff games. I think that's something that could be a fun addition. Would the Vikings be a team to do it? I mean, that would be a hell of a trio. And they could do it because they have, assuming they roll forward with J.J. McCarthy and don't bring back Sam Darnold, you got a quarterback on a rookie deal. And surrounding him with as much talent as possible would be of the utmost importance. And if you have, you got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and Cooper Kupp in the same receiving core with J.J. McCarthy, you'd find out really quick if he's your guy or not because there wouldn't be any excuses. Be like, all right, dude, we've got like 3 top 25 receivers. If you can't figure that out, that's on you. That's not to say that he has to throw 40 touchdowns to be considered good, but like there's got to be something there. So if anything, that's a move that Minnesota can make to figure out, all right, is this our guy or not? If they move forward with him, then they're pretty confident in it. They drafted him for a reason because they feel confident in that. But that's a team that I would also pay attention to, and I think would be really fun, just offensively. We know how good of a coach Kevin O'Connell is. So I would pay attention to that. And these are all teams that the Steelers are going to have to fight with. And it's one of those situations where if you're Omar Khan, you can't get too stubborn where you're just trying to like win the trade and look like a genius. You can't be so steadfast on only giving up like 2 7s to make this thing work. When they brought in Allen Robinson, they got him for next to nothing. Like, Cooper Kupp is much better than Allen Robinson was when you brought him in from Los Angeles. You're going to have to give up more than that for Cooper Kupp. And if it means giving up a 4, then okay, give up a 4. What are you going to take in the 4th round that's going to be immediately more impactful than Cooper Kupp is right now? Probably nothing. So that's what I don't want to see. Because for an entire offseason, we went back and forth on, is Brandon Ayuk going to be a Steeler? What's the holdup here? What is Omar Khan not budging? Are the 49ers just really not budging either? They're kind of at this standstill in negotiations. And obviously it didn't end up getting done. But if Omar Khan was a bit more aggressive, maybe it would have gotten done. So I don't want to be sitting here having this exact same conversation that we had about the Brandon Ayuk stuff next year. And hopefully they can get something done for a Cooper Kupp to make themselves better, help out whatever quarterback's there. Again, I assume it's going to be Justin Fields. Just reading the tea leaves, that's who I feel like it's going to be. But yeah, if you can bring in a Cooper Kupp to make your offense better, then you do it. Now, don't go around just handing a second round pick out. That would be dumb. But if it's a fourth, you just kind of swallow it. You're like, all right, fair enough. We'll give you that. Because again, you're going to have other teams that you're going to be competing with. And I think that Houston is the one that I would keep the closest eye on, again, just because the Rams pass game coordinator, Nick Caley, is now the Texans offensive coordinator. Obvious connective tissue there. And they're a team that legitimately has a case of saying, hey, if we get one or two more pieces, we can be Super Bowl contenders. Like CJ Stroud, very good quarterback. They need to fix the offensive line, but defensively, they're very good. And if they fix the offensive line and give CJ Stroud give him more time to do the stuff that he did as a rookie rather than constantly running for his life and ended up being the second most sacked quarterback in football, then I think they could be back in business. And even with all those issues, they still won a playoff game. So they're not far away from taking that next step. It's just this year was somewhat stagnant because of issues that they didn't foresee happening. So Houston, to me, is the biggest threat of getting Kupp and somebody that the Steelers are really going to have to try to outbid. But again, I think Minnesota is a realistic option too. I think Washington makes a lot of sense. Buffalo makes a lot of sense. But I don't think they're going to send him to a team that he says, no, I don't want to go there. He made it pretty clear in his tweet where it's like, the Rams are going to work with me and my family to put me in a situation where I can still win a championship. Which, by the way, I think it's classy, but I think he's also owed that. Because without him, they don't have a Super Bowl a couple years ago against Cincinnati. I mean, he balled out in that playoff run. For the love of the game route against Tampa Bay, where there's 20 seconds left, they get in field goal range, they win the game. He was Super Bowl MVP against the Bengals. So, I mean, this is a guy where they aren't raising a Lombardi a few years ago, if not for Cooper Kupp. Triple Crown winner, 145 catches in a season. So, he has had an incredible career with the Rams, and they don't raise a Super Bowl if not for him. So I think it's incredibly classy of them saying, yeah, we'll send you, where you would want to go and still give you a chance to compete for a title. It's just we feel like it's time for us to move on and start, a quasi, not rebuild because they just won the division and Stafford's still there, at least for now. Although there does seem to be a situation where Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp could both be Steelers. Like, you look at the post-game pressers and the post-game interviews that Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford gave after they lost to Philadelphia. Sean McVay was very adamant, man, I'm very proud of Matthew Stafford. Stafford was asked, if he felt like he still had a lot of football in him. He said yes. Asked if it was going to be with the Rams. He said, we'll see. So, there is no guarantee that he's going to be back. Mina Kimes talked about it on her show that he could have played his final game with the Rams. They owe him, I think it's a $4 million roster bonus, which, I mean, that's not crazy. But, for a team that may feel like, all right, I think we've kind of hit our ceiling with this thing. We're going to trade Cooper Kupp. We're going to maybe do some sort of sign and trade with Matthew Stafford. That's something to look out for. Now look, if the Steelers can get Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, they should absolutely do that. You want to talk about, hey, we're committed to winning. Yeah, go get a Super Bowl winning quarterback who's still got it. Very much still has it. Like Matthew Stafford, the numbers aren't going to look as gaudy as they did maybe back in the year that they won the Super Bowl. But if you watched any of the Rams this year, especially in the playoffs, man, Stafford's still that dude. And it would be a much improved version of going out and getting Russell Wilson last year, where there's no questions if Stafford's still good. Now look, Russ proved something this past season, where, especially in that Cincinnati game, where he threw for over 400 yards and they put up 40. But Matthew Stafford is much better than Russell Wilson. And while I think it's going to be Justin Fields, if there becomes a situation where it's evident that they can get Stafford, they should do it. And if you can get Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp at the same time, already some built-in chemistry between the two of them, that's a team that automatically, to me, jumps to, okay, that team can, that's a better team than what it was last year. And maybe this is the team that will end the playoff drought. And that's going to be the narrative for the Steelers going into every season until it happens. All right, can this team win a playoff game? They keep getting to the playoffs, but they don't win. But if you get Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, I would have the utmost confidence that you can. However, you still have Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith. So that would take away some of my confidence, especially with all the reports coming out about Arthur Smith taking away Russ's ability to check at the line of scrimmage after the Bengals game because he wanted them to stick to the run game. Just complete idiocy in Pittsburgh. I would love to see Matthew Stafford go to Pittsburgh and have Arthur Smith tell him, hey, by the way, don't check out of the play. Stafford would be like, oh, okay. Yeah, definitely not going to, make adjustments that can get more yards, rather just, get this 2-yard carry and set up 3rd and 8. You dingbat. The Steelers are so just locked in 1978. It's baffling. But I'm going to try not to rant too much about that. Regardless, the point is, if they can get Cooper Kupp, absolutely get Cooper Kupp. And if there's a world where Matthew Stafford becomes available, get Matthew Stafford. If your whole thing is, we're committed to winning in the playoffs, not just getting there, not just happy to win 9-10 games a year, then freaking prove it. Go out and get 9. He would have to change his jersey number, probably back to what it was at Georgia. What did he wear at Georgia? I think it was either, I'm going to get this so wrong. I'm down to 3. I think it was either 7, 11, or 15. I'm going to guess it was 7. He ain't wearing 7, though. What did Matthew Stafford wear at Georgia? I'm going to look it up right now. We're going to do this on the fly, see what number this fellow wore at Georgia. My guess is that it was 7. I was also just a wee lad when he was playing at Georgia. He wore 7. I was right. All right, cool. Yeah, he ain't wearing 7, though. Unless Chris Boswell changes his jersey number, he ain't going to get 9 either. So, I don't know. What number could Stafford wear if he went there? 6 doesn't look great, especially not in the Steelers' current font. Patrick Queen also already has 6, so take that out. Corliss Waitman currently has 8. If he comes back, assuming Cam Johnston doesn't, I don't know. We'll play that game if and when we get there. But yeah, if you can get Cooper Kupp, go get Cooper Kupp. If it costs you a 4th-round pick, then it costs you a 4th-round pick. Just do it. You can't just be playing this game of musical chairs with receivers like you did last year, and then you end up with Van Jefferson as your number 2 receiver, and we all saw how that went. So don't be so stingy. Don't be completely passive either. Don't just, go tossing around a 3rd-round pick for Cooper Kupp. I wouldn't do that. But it's a guy that still has football left in him. Adam Thielen is 35 and still playing at a really good level. I think that Cooper Kupp can still go. I think that he still has multiple years left in him. And if you can get him, then you absolutely should outbid these teams that are going to also be in on him. And if Matthew Stafford becomes available too, then get that band back together and make the Steelers a real threat in the AFC rather than just being a threat in the wild card to, be the 6th seed. Add Stafford, add Kupp, add, some minor additions as well, like a Darius Slayton. Give yourself a nice trio of receivers, and the offense is already worlds better than what it was a year ago. So we'll see what the offseason brings. Again, we got so much more time to talk about all this, and this is going to be far from the last time we talk about it. So like I said at the start of the show, if you're not already subscribed on YouTube, please be sure to do that. Leave a comment, like the video, do all that fun YouTube stuff. If you're listening on the the Pump Fake podcast feed, try saying that 5 times fast. If you're listening on the Pump Fake Podcast feed. Be sure to leave a review. Appreciate you all for tuning in. See you soon, both on YouTube and in your podcast airwaves. Thank you guys for tuning in.